Good afternoon, everyone. I understand that you had a brilliant speaker this morning, a parent who spoke to you about services and their child, and you've also had, I hope, a good lunch. So no pressure, I think, on me this afternoon as the first person after the good lunch. If I can start by saying welcome to everyone. I know some of you were here last week for the full day. Some of you have obviously been here this morning, and some of you will be joining us for the first time this afternoon. I attended last week's event, and I was really impressed by the cross-section of representation, which included parents, young people and professionals from all of the statutory organisations and from the voluntary sector. It was a really well-attended event. As you will be aware, we've got 3 days, last week, this week and a day next week, and the aim of these days is to co-produce with young people, parents and professionals a strategic plan for the next 3 years to help us to get where we want to be in 2020. And clearly it's vital that we have as wide a participation as we possibly can to engage in this process. So I would like to thank you all for giving up the time to be here today. At last week's conference, a number of key themes emerged, and I'm sure that the events taking place today and next week will build on these views and add to them. If I can just say that we've had an opportunity to analyse some of the feedback from last week, some of the work that people did, etc. And there were really 5 key themes that emerged, and none of them will be a surprise, I don't think, to anyone actually. There are probably lots of things that we would have identified on our own, but it's been interesting to do those as a multi-agency parents, young people group to look at what we all see jointly as some of the issues we need to address over the coming years with our strategy. So the first one was communication. And that, I think, was highlighted across the room on all of the tables. We had feedback about the need to improve communication. The importance of clear, easily accessible and readily available information was highlighted by everyone in the room, I think. And alongside this was the importance of listening to parental concerns. I think that's an area which we would all say about that listening skill, ensuring we engage fully with parents and young people. Another area that was identified was that the need for professionals to have a good understanding of the local offer and to be able to share that with families and young people. So there was a whole range of things around communication. The next area was early identification and the importance of that early identification of need. Not necessarily diagnosis or children having labels, but that identifying what a child's need is at the earliest possible stage. And then, having identified that need, ensuring that we have effective early intervention. And I think that's possibly one of the areas that you'll be discussing and we need to build on going forward in our strategy. The importance of effective intervention, evidence-based, that we know has good outcomes for children and young people, and we need to build that in to any of our plans going forward. Planning was the third area that was identified across all tables, which talked about us being proactive and not reactive. I think that's often a justifiable criticism of lots of the services we provide. We get into a reactive rather than a proactive mode, which obviously is not where we want to be and not part of our strategy going forward. And that planning needs to start as early as possible. And all of the tables identified, whether that's the planning between nursery to primary, primary to secondary, that post-school planning needs to happen with all the key professionals, but to be clear and available to families and young people so they're aware of their choices and what services are available. Training was the fourth area that people highlighted, and that was about having a robust workforce in place which were skilled and trained staff to meet the needs of our young people. and about the importance of sharing that learning and skills across all of our settings, whether they may be mainstream or specialist, how that we can work together to share our skills and to support children and young people. And the final area that was pretty consistent across was choice and options, about families, children and young people having a choice about the options that are available. And this was particularly evident when we were discussing post-16 and the need for young people to be able to have a choice about what their future could be around apprenticeships, supported work placements, internships, college, schools, whatever that was. And I'm sure next week, when we've got a day that's looking at preparing for adulthood, that will be something that we can build upon and look about how we can include that into the strategy going forward. As you're aware, this afternoon is to focus on statutory education, and in addition to the key themes that were identified across all of the tables last week and across all of the areas, there was some particular feedback and themes that related more specifically to statutory education, to that 5 to 16-year-old group of children and young people that many of us here today work with. The biggest area I think that was identified was the importance of inclusion. The need to challenge effectively when inclusion is not evident, and for inclusive practice to be embedded in all of the services that operate across the county. And I think that's an area that we do know we need to work harder on, and there are some areas that we need to work with to ensure that it is embedded practice. It's not an add-on or a thought after, but it's embedded that we are inclusive in our practice. The other area that was identified was social inclusion, which needs equal focus in schools to other areas of the curriculum, which links into inclusion, the importance for young people about entering the world and being able to take part in society and be supported to do so. There was a comment, which we need to look at and address, in that there are too many part-time timetables within our schools. That's something that we do need to focus on. And that staff need to increase parental confidence in their ability to meet needs. And I think that's again about having that workforce that has the skills and the support, and us having a workforce programme over the coming years to ensure that all of our staff have areas of skills and knowledge, and that we're sharing that practice. I'm sure this afternoon you will have the opportunity to identify areas for further development and areas of good practice to build on, which is something that we had last week when people did identify lots of areas of good practice which we do need to take forward and ensure that we build on those going forward. Clearly, all the work that we're doing over these 3 days is important for us to be able to incorporate into our future planning and get us all to where we want to be in 2020. So I'm sure you're going to have a very interesting afternoon. We've got 2 performances from the pupils at Northgate School, which I think will be a lot more exciting than me, so I shall swiftly move on. And they're going to be with you now. I think Nikki's going to introduce their performance, and I'm sure when they arrive on the stage you'll give them a warm welcome. Thank you for your engagement, and I'm sure you'll have a very successful afternoon.